The new Planet Coaster 2 DLC is here and it contains the highly requested single rail coaster. Today I'm going to take you through building my first ever one of these. Thank you so much to Frontier for once again giving me early access to the DLC. I can't wait to see what everyone's going to create with it. Now, I've wanted a single rail coaster in Planet Coaster 2 for such a long time, and it's amazing that we now finally have one. And it feels really well integrated as well. This is only one of 2 coasters in this new DLC, the rest of it focuses on parades, which are really cool, and the amount of work that Frontier have put into that is insane. But obviously I am more focused and interested on the coaster, and this single rail coaster does look fantastic. It is obviously modelled after the very popular Rocky Mountain construction single rail coaster, commonly known as the Raptor, and it's just really cool to have this in the game now, along with the thicker RMC single rail coaster, which I think is known as the T-Rex track. So it is really cool that we finally have the 2 of them in the game. You can see just the standard track here. The track connectors look really good, very accurate to what it looks like in real life, so I'm really impressed with the detailing on that. Along with the lift hill as well, I really like the catwalk and the handrail there, and the netting. That again looks very realistic to what it looks like in real life. There's no launches or anything with this one, it is just the lift hill, and as you can see here you can't turn off the catwalk, which is a little bit annoying because I don't think all of the catwalks have that netting element on there, but we do also get drive tyres and I think 2 different types of braking as well. We get friction brakes along with magnetic brakes too. We'll get into the build process now of me designing my first ever RMC single rail in Planet Coaster 2. That is an awesome sentence to say. I am very happy that we now have this model in the game. Now, for the actual design inspiration of this layout, I am actually doing a little bit of a remaster in a way of a coaster that I made way back in Planet Coaster 1 about 4 years ago. Yeah, I made this in May 2022 and I'm sort of attempting to recreate at least the first part of the layout just because I think this element here is very satisfying, as you can see on your screen now. That is the coaster I made in Planet Coaster 1. Obviously that is the much thicker RMC T-Rex type of track that I was on about, and we now have the much smaller one and the one that's actually been built in real life, the Raptor one, to play with in this game. So I am going to attempt to make this element here, which is sort of after the first drop. It goes into a really high, slightly stalled overbank turn, and turns around and does sort of a nice elevated corkscrew over itself, and then like back around underneath the lift hill, which I just thought was a really cool visual when I was originally designing that, and thought it would work really nicely on this one too. Now, in terms of real life inspiration from these coasters, I'm probably not the best person to be designing one of these, since I've only ridden 1, or I guess you can call it 2, of these RMC Raptors with Joy at Wallaby Holland. This is a pair of dueling RMC Raptor coasters, one thrill and one chill, and while I wasn't the biggest fan of either of them, I'll be completely honest, just because I think the train design on these is pretty terrible. These trains, in my opinion, shouldn't be doing inversions with how restrictive they are and just the uncomfortable riding position. But it is a very pretty coaster, and I did really enjoy how RMC created the layout for this. So my layout is mostly going to be inspired by this, since I haven't ridden any of the cloned models that are around the world. These layouts are quite similar across all of the cloned models. I think there's only like a few like differences across the different models of the cloned RMC Raptor coasters, but yeah, this one's going to be more inspired by Yoy and I guess just other coasters in general, a bit of Intamin and a bit of Mack in there, because I haven't experienced any of the other ones in real life, so I don't really know sort of how their ride experiences compare to the RMC Raptors that I have actually ridden. But as you can see here, the layout is beginning to take shape, and it was at this point in the build where I suddenly decided that I think this is way too big. I originally got the height for this from like the other larger models of RMC Raptor that are out there, and I just came to the conclusion after I was doing a bit of smoothing and like checking the forces, which you should always be doing whilst you're building coasters like this. If you check the forces early on, you can realise where there is errors, and I definitely realised that this coaster is just way too big. And obviously with getting early access to this DLC, I didn't have much time to make this video, so I thought I would go for a much smaller one where I could focus on the details and profiling a lot more closely. And there you go, as we can see here, we now have a considerably smaller lift hill. Like I said, I just did this so I can focus more on the profiling and a little bit more time towards the layout as well, and then eventually decorating it up with some nice custom supports later on, because I didn't have the longest time to make this video, especially with my ongoing park series Moorview Meadow, which is taking up most of my free time at the moment, which I'm fine with, because I'm really enjoying that series at the moment, and it seems like you all are as well, which is fantastic to see. But yeah, pretty happy with how this coaster actually turns out, actually. The reason this model exists in real life is so that parks can get like a pretty decent thrill coaster for fairly cheap, because obviously the track is much thinner, the trains are much smaller as well and seat a lot less people, so parks can get these pretty decent thrill coasters for a smaller price, and because of how small the trains and the track are, they can fit into some really narrow plots of land in the parks that they get installed into, especially because like the turning circle of these trains being so small, they can do some really elaborate and very tight maneuvers, fit into some small spaces in parks, and they just give a really unique ride experience. I think it's a really fascinating coaster model. I did find the profiling for these first few elements particularly tricky. I'm sure, as you saw in the clip of the RMC single rail that I made in Planet Coaster 1, the profiling and smoothness of that wasn't amazing. Obviously we didn't have the incredible smoothing tools that are in Planet Coaster 2 now, but also I hadn't been playing Planet Coaster for the longest time when I made that video, so my skills I hope have improved since then. But yeah, I did find this sort of the flowiness of this transition to be particularly challenging, especially coming into this inversion here, because you've got the issue of the track, like the entry into this inversion being really close to the track below it, so you need to make sure you've got correct amount of clearance there. You want the roll on, like the way that these RMC Raptors do inversions is a little bit similar, I guess, to the way that the newer gen Vekoma models do it, where like the turning rate of the rotation through these inversions is fairly constant, so getting that was a little bit difficult as well. And then also just making the layout actually feel quite unique compared to the other RMC Raptor coasters that I know of. It was a little bit challenging. I always like to build coasters around things. I mentioned that in, I can't remember which video it was. It was a while ago when I was talking about like building coasters around things for them to be able to interact with something. I find that much easier to design that way, because I feel like I'm doing now, if I'm just designing a coaster in a field with no boundaries and no restrictions or anything, it definitely limits my creativity in a way that I'm not reacting to what I'm designing around, so it just ends up feeling very generic and could exist anywhere. So after I designed these first few elements, I made it come down into this overbank turn here, and then I knew that I wanted this section to sort of be a bit of an out and back portion and then return to the main area of the ride, sort of as if I'm designing around buildings and structures and pathways that don't actually exist, but giving myself the limitation of a shape for this layout definitely helped make it feel a lot more realistic. And then from here, like I mentioned before, testing the forces as you're going around and building these elements is definitely better to do whilst you're building them, not at the end, because you might need to change the scale, like the size, or completely change the layout in general to adjust to make sure the forces are reasonably safe. So I always recommend doing this as you're going along, and you can make the necessary tweaks that you need to. I then started adding in the brake run of sort of where I expected the ride to finish. This doesn't actually end up being the case, but I do like to add the brake run before I finish the layout, simply because I see it quite a lot where you end up with a really jank transition into the brake run, or the brake run, you have a nice transition into it, but the transition from the brake run into the station always ends up being really jank because you're trying to get it to work like you're always building on... I'm really struggling to put this into words. You're building the layout sort of as you go from start to finish, so that last connection into the station always feels really jank. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So if I build the brake run first, then it sort of informs where the layout of the coaster is going to go, and it makes the ending experience feel a bit more natural. Although the brake run that as I've designed it there doesn't actually stay there, so you'll see how I design around that later on. Then from here I was sort of deciding how to actually get the coaster back to the station. There was a couple of different layout variations I tried of this. This one here I thought I'd go into a tunnel underground, like underneath a certain part of the coaster, but like I mentioned earlier, I like to think of these coasters when I'm building them to have realistic design restrictions. So I thought with this coaster model being one that is installed by parks because it's like a particularly cheaper model than most, they probably wouldn't have the budget for a tunnel, because tunnels are fairly expensive. Like obviously you have to dig it all out, put the retaining in, drainage and everything. So I thought instead of having a tunnel, I'd actually remove this section, because I think here it very quickly loses speed, and I thought In terms of track length as well, you probably wouldn't have it running all the way back down to that out and back section like I mentioned, just sort of doing another lap of it. And as it's getting to this point in the coaster's like layout, it's not going to have the most speed here either. So I did sort of slot in the brake run here and then try to return it back to it with different varying levels of success. So after I'd removed a fairly large chunk of the coaster, I was quite set on having a series of airtime hills here, or at least one airtime hill, because I thought it is a fairly inversion centric layout at the moment. But I also really wanted to put a loop in. I just thought there isn't an RMC Raptor coaster that I know of, or even just a single roller coaster, I don't think, that just has a standard loop. I feel like with coaster elements at the moment, we always try and, I say we, coaster designers always try to put in loads of very unique, quirky like coaster elements that, I don't know, like not really world's first, but like just stuff that's really unique and interesting and varying different sensations when designing coasters, just to make them stand out, which is perfectly okay. I like it when a coaster model is really unique. I think about how many unique elements like Hyperia has, and coasters like that are trying to really stand out from the rest. But at the same time, I don't know, it almost feels like certain classic elements don't really get thought about anymore. Just like a loop, I can't think of any coasters that have opened fairly recently that just have a classic loop. It's nice to see one on Tormentor's, what's it called, Rampaging Run or whatever it's called. Tormentor has a loop, and I really do like that B&M are still doing loops, because not many other manufacturers are. So I was desperate to put in a loop on this coaster, but it just didn't work. There wasn't enough space for it, and with the amount of layout that was remaining and how much track length I thought I wanted to put into the rest of this coaster, there just wasn't enough space for it. So it doesn't end up having one. But I would definitely like to put more loops in coasters, I guess. It's just a TED talk about how I like loops. I guess I feel the same way about like Cobra rolls as well. I really like a good Cobra roll, but yeah, not many manufacturers do them anymore. Anyway, custom supporting, I'm sure that's what quite a few of you were waiting for me to do. I'm not going to be custom supporting the entire coaster here, like I mentioned, because of just timing and everything. I like to spend a lot of time custom supporting a coaster, and I didn't have the time for that on this project, but I did have the time to do the entire lift hill supported, because I was only really going to do the areas where the game's generated supports weren't really that good, and the lift hill does end up being one of those spots, because the game at the moment just puts in single columns that are going down, and it doesn't really have any like cross bracing or anything like any of the A-frame supports you would typically see on coasters of this size. I know the lift hill on Yoi is a little bit different, but it's because there's two coaster tracks together, so they both sort of, the vertical columns of those kind of support each other, which is quite cool. You can see there I was just reloading in the game generated coaster supports to sort of see what was going on, get a bit of inspiration from those, and then eventually build my own to make up the lift hill. You can see here which pieces I'm using if you'd like to replicate this. It's sort of the closest I could get to the RMC lift hill style and their support style as well, because it is pretty consistent. You sort of have this like square shaped connector that's on the track that the I guess another connector piece fastens into, and then you connect that to the main supports here. And as you can see, I'm making this A-frame structure like I mentioned, or I guess this isn't really an A-frame, it's just like a main column with a side structural piece, and then this forms the basis of the main lift hill. I know I've had quite a few people in comment sections asking in the past when I will do a like realistic coasters tutorial and a custom supporting tutorial. As much as I would really like to do those videos, I think especially for custom supporting, but definitely for coasters as well, because there's that many different types of coasters out there and different supporting methods, and obviously every manufacturer does their own thing for element design and custom supporting design as well. I think it would be really difficult for me to condense all you need to know about realistic coasters and custom supports into one video. So what I've really been trying to do recently is when I am designing coasters and custom supporting coasters, like I'll definitely work this into the Moorview Meadow series, is like give you tips and tricks sort of along the way as I'm designing stuff, whether that's update style or time-lapse like I am doing here, just to really show you how I do custom supports, because I think a full-blown tutorial would take a very long time for me to produce, and it would have to be a fairly hefty tutorial, like maybe an hour long, just to cover all of the different types of custom supporting as well, because not every manufacturer does it the same. Like if you look at this one here, like an RMC single rail compared to how Intamin custom support their coasters, B&M are especially quite different. If you're looking at like a broader range of manufacturers like Schwarzkopf or Arrow and Vekoma, like their older models, or even like wooden coasters, especially RMCs, like their hybrid models. Every manufacturer custom supports, I say custom supports, not in real life, every manufacturer supports their coasters in a different way. Like if you look at some of Mac supports on Hyperion and Icon, they're all over the place, because I think Mac actually auto-generate their supports using software, and like other manufacturers will custom design them for every element of the attraction. So it's a bit all over the place. I could never get it, I don't think, into one tutorial that covers everything. So I think covering it in this way, where I mention all the little bits you need to know as you're going along for specific rides and models like this, is probably a more helpful way of doing it, and definitely easier for me to create the content for that too. And I think quite a lot of custom supporting as well, especially for more unique styles of custom supporting like on this coaster, is a lot of iterative design, and you can't really teach that in a way. I'd say definitely the best trick I have for custom supporting coasters, which I've said many times, is definitely look at reference photos of these coasters in real life, because you can't really get more accurate than looking at the real life versions of these coasters to see how it is done. So definitely look at those. This was a part in the video where I really started to study the lift hill and like first few element supports of the cloned models of the RMC Raptors, and I noticed that the lift hill is so weirdly supported. It is mostly these like random vertical columns, but there are a few like lattice structures that connect it to certain elements. I'm assuming just for general structure throughout the entire ride to make sure that it's quite strong, and then obviously because all of these different elements are connected to each other, like I'm doing here, connecting the inversion to the lift hill, it just makes the whole ride a lot stronger. If you have multiple vertical columns connected to each other with the cross sections like this, and obviously it just helps to make the ride a lot more smoother as well, because it has those stronger connections to support itself from. I then started from here on adding like more side supports, I guess, to the in-game generated supports that I decided to keep. There were quite a few of them that were actually okay. It was mainly the lower down sections of track that the like in-game support generation is normally pretty good, but the larger elements, and especially the elements that cross over each other as well, where you've got track on top of each other, the game really struggles with what to do with them. So I did fully custom support those parts, and for the sections of track that are lower down to the ground, like these ones here, I did just add like sideways bracing to this as well. And you can see I did build this using 4-meter track sections just so I could get the profiling sort of exactly how I wanted it to be, and then I'm going around afterwards and deleting the like 2 4-meter track sections and making 1 8-meter track section, just so the in-game track connectors look a lot more realistic to how it would be in real life. But then, like I mentioned, of course, you do get the much larger elements of this coaster that require a fair bit more attention when it comes to either altering the in-game support or adding custom support. And like you can see with this overbank here, I had to add like sideways bracing to both sides of the support, because it is quite a main one, I guess, for this turn, and with its proximity to the station you can't really have a lot of support going on there. And then for the first inversion on the ride, this like overbanked inverting stall thing, I guess, you have to go really custom with these sort of inversions. They are quite similar to more general steel coasters than anything that RMC would normally do, but yeah, you do have to add in a few elements like this. Like the game just completely didn't support any of this, because I think because of how close it is to the station and the brake run track underneath it, you do have to fully customize this. But I do actually really enjoy custom supporting. It makes your coasters feel a lot more like designed rather than just sort of plonked down. They interact with the surrounding area, I think, a lot nicer when they have custom support, and then it gives you the opportunity to create some really unique moments in your theme parks, like interacting with pathways. Like I love a support in a pathway. It just looks so cool and really grounds the scale of the coaster for your guests as well. And then you end up with cool moments like this, where I added the support here, checked the proximity of the coaster to this support and realized that it was coming around way too close. So just for the profiling and the clearance, I had to move the support slightly into the station, which you do see some supports do go through coaster stations, especially on the Smiler. You get quite a few actually going through the gift shop, which is quite cool. So yeah, it just adds a little bit more realism to it in that way. And there you go, that is my build of the new single rail coaster in the Parades DLC for Planet Coaster 2. This DLC will be available from the 25th of June, and I'm really excited to see what you all create with not only this coaster, but all of the amazing new scenery items, all of the parade stuff, which looks fantastic, and even the new B&M dive coaster with those smaller trains. I'll leave you with some cinematics of the coaster and a POV at the end. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments, and if you're excited for this new DLC. I know I am. There's quite a lot of rides that I can't wait to add to Moorview Meadow. I will see you next time. Goodbye.